It's time for the College of Bass with Kevin VanDam and Steve Pennaz.
Hey everybody, welcome to College of Bass tonight. Thanks for joining us. We're presented by Plano. Hey, I know I'm not the only one this past week that really enjoyed the coverage of Red Crest and the elite tournament down on the Tennessee River. And you know why? It's because I love tough bites. And tough bites are the situations where the learning curve really explodes. And there was a lot of great information that came out. Hey Kevin, how you doing tonight?
Man, I'm doing great. Excited. We got a heck of a show planned.
Yeah, we really do. We got some good stuff. But hey, one of the things that stood out at Red Crest to me was during the knockout round, you mentioned on camera that you were getting a lot of strikes, a lot of short strikes. And I didn't think much of it until Friday during the championship round. I don't know if it was Zach Berger or somebody else, but he mentioned the exact same thing about getting short strikes. So when you run into that, what are some of the first things you start looking at in terms of getting, turning bites into fish in the boat?
Yeah, we had a warming trend. There was a full moon coming, and the fish are wanting to spawn, and those males are the first ones to move up. And in Major League Fishing, we were fishing a 2-pound minimum there at Red Crest. So a 14-inch legal bass there is like a £1.4, £1.6. So you have to target that next grade of fish. You got to target those females. So I was using a Strike King Thunder Cricket. A bladed jig is one of my favorite big fish baits in the pre-spawn like that. And a lot of those females should stage right outside of where those males first start fanning beds. So that, or a swim bait, going to a bigger bait and thinking, based on the time of the year that you want to fish something that's just a little deeper, just out in front of, that real shallow cover where a lot of those males and stuff might set up. So that's what I was trying to do, but they were biting funny that day for me. It was frustrating. I lost 4 good ones and it cost me, with that format, anything can happen on the championship round. And so I was pretty bummed. I'll be thinking about that one for a while.
A number of questions that came in, especially after the show from a couple of weeks ago when we went deep into spinner baits. They asked, why were you throwing a Thunder Cricket versus a spinner bait in that situation?
Well, the biggest thing is throwing a 3/8 ounce Thunder Cricket in that real shallow water. A bladed jig has a ton of lift, and it allowed me to have a bait that had a ton of vibration and keep it in the strike zone longer. It's real. I could reel it real slow, put it on 20-pound fluorocarbon, and just fish it real slow. Literally most of the bites that I had were in, a foot to 2 feet of water at most. And, a spinner bait, you throw it up there, you got to throw a light spinner bait with big Colorado blades. And I did throw one, but it just seemed like that Thunder Cricket was the best, especially, that first day it was easy. I caught 20 pounds quick, and actually laid off and went practicing. So, it's just the way, that's how fast they change that time of year.
So last Sunday, Jeff Gustafson won his first elite event, and really it was a technique that kind of blew everybody away with the Damiki rig, or what they call up north the hanging a minnow thing. But you weren't really shocked that he actually won the tournament with that technique, are you?
No, it's a great wintertime technique. It's just real subtle, and any place where there's shad and real cold water like that, it's going to, it's a swim bait without the action. And, those fish were there. He had it down, he was just basically drifting that canal between the two lakes, between, Loudon there and Tellico. And it was in Knoxville. I've practiced that thing when we fished the Classic there a couple of years ago, and it was an awesome area. I side imaged all those rocks, and so I've spent a bunch of time there just fishing like I normally would. I dragged a tube just like we would in the Great Lakes and stuff. So it was pretty ingenious that he was hanging that thing above them. But with all that current there, those fish would just see it go over the top of them, and he caught the heck out of them. It was impressive. He won that thing wire to wire leading from the first day.
And that's not real common to win wire to wire. Why is that most of the time? You run out of fish or what?
It is. It's hard, I mean, local pressure and things like that, just like at Red Crest, Brian Thrift dominated the first few days, and he had one spot he was doing that from, and, the pressure and locals, and it just got to him. The great thing that Gussy had is he had a pretty big area there. I mean, that canal is long and there's a lot of different rocks in it, and nobody else had any idea. Even just watching him drift, they don't know exactly what he's doing. So that's how tournaments are typically won. That's why pro fishermen are who they are, is that they usually figure out things that are different than what the locals ever do in that area. I mean, who would have ever dreamed that it would have been won on the Damiki rig, or Red Crest would have been won on a jerkbait in brush piles at Lake Eufaula. So it's the same kind of thing. I mean, it happens almost everywhere we go.
Hey, a little bit later in the show, we're going to bring in Plano Pro Christine Fisher. She's well known as a tournament bass fisherman, but from kayaks. She's been fishing a number of circuits. There's actually 3 kayak tournament circuits out there, and she fishes probably 20 to 25 events a year, which to me is a lot of time on the road, man. But she'll be in segment 4, and I'm looking forward to talking to her.
Yeah, she's really good at it. Kayak fishing has just exploded in the last few years, and with a kayak, you can get to places that you can't get. I can't get my Z21 anywhere close to there, and it's fun. I've done it a good bit. I've got a couple of nephews that are really big into it, and they fish the tournaments and stuff too. So it is a sport that is growing really fast.
I got to tell you a quick kayak story. I was on a local body of water. I didn't know it real well. Just moved there. I grabbed a kayak one morning because I didn't have a boat in the water, didn't have a dock, anything. I was throwing a weightless plastic worm along a weed line. I get a thump, set the hook. I thought I had about a 20-pound muskie on. Pull up, it was actually a giant pike. And I reached down to grab it. I could barely get my hands around the back. And as soon as I touched the fish, it went into an S and jumped over me. It literally jumped over my head and landed on the side of the boat. So kayak fishing, it can be really fun. Hey, before we go any further, Kevin, I want to congratulate John Creek of Wymore, Nebraska, for winning the Plano prize pack last week. We're going to give away another prize pack tonight. It's worth $275. It's from Plano. It's got a great Plano box, some great baits from Strike King, and some Plano Edge boxes. And the other cool thing is it's got the Yeti College of Bass mug, which is also pretty special as well.
Yeah, the cool thing is that Yeti and Plano got together, and they are donating all the proceeds from this mug that you can buy off the Plano site, to the Professional Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. So, I mean, it's a super cool mug. I use mine. Like, this is the one sponsor product. Yeti's a sponsor of mine, and I asked them about doing this, and it's the one thing that I use every single day. And I get coffee in the morning. I keep water in it all. I drink a lot of water. I keep it in my boat, keeps ice forever. They're awesome. So, and again, every cent of that purchase, if you go to, and get one of these that are specially monogrammed for the College of Bass from Plano, every cent goes to the Professional Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And they do a lot of great work. And, I'm excited to be part of it. I worked with them for a long time. I got lucky to get inducted a few years ago. So it's a pretty awesome deal.
That's pretty cool. I learned years back that I don't bring this type of thing home because Karen makes them disappear. So if you have a spouse like that, buy 2. Oh, so you have one at your own disposal, which is really cool. Hey, Kevin, we had a number of questions last week that we couldn't get to during the show, and I wanted to dig deep into a couple of them. One of them I thought was funny, though, is from a guy named Andrew J., who said, okay, he's not going to answer any of these questions, so just watch. But the truth is, Andrew, we actually are going to answer the questions tonight, so I just wanted to point that out to everybody. But, hey, one of the questions came from Frank Recchia. He said, do you ever use finesse-style swim baits in place of a jerkbait? And if so, what are the conditions that you like to try that?
Yeah, so I do. It's something that I'm thinking about when I'm fishing a jerkbait in real clear water and I'm getting a lot of fish follow but not react. Even throwing a finesse jerkbait, sometimes it's just too overpowering of a presentation, and a subtle, that little Strike King 275 rage swimmer, just slow retrieve like that. It's very natural and it can be really good. I got the whole crew behind me. So. Life goes on at the VanDam household.
That's cute. And we had another question from Brett Prairie. He said, "Are Plano Edge boxes rust proof?" And the answer on that is absolutely yes.
Yeah, they really are. So they have restrictor molded. I mean, I've got one right here. This is my frog box, and even in the clear plastic lid, the dividers, every part of this box has restrictor molded in it, which stops rust from even starting. It's proven fact. Plus, it's got the water wick in there, and it's got a gasket seal to make it waterproof as well. And it's just awesome. So I fished with these last year all season long, and I've always used the Plano waterproof boxes, and they've been my favorite. But I'll still get some rust, especially if you put a spinner bait or a frog in there that's still got some moisture in it. You're putting moisture in a waterproof box, so it really makes a difference. I had my bladed jig box all last year, same thing, and not a bit of rust in my jigs, frogs, or anything, crankbaits or anything. It really is a game changer.
So what do you think about it? I mean, how much do you have in a crankbait box or a jig box?
Oh, I mean,
hundreds.
Yeah, I've got 170 Thunder Crickets in my Thunder Cricket box, and they're $14 a piece. If you take a 6XD box, and you're gonna have I've got thousands and thousands of dollars invested in those baits, and then I replace so many of those treble hooks on my crankbaits with the Mustad KVD treble. So not only the time, but the investment in the treble hooks there too. Same thing. Your terminal box. Who knows how much money's in my terminal box, So you want to make sure that you're doing it. So, even though an edge box is a little more expensive than a standard, Plano box, it's well worth it.
Yeah, especially for the rust proofing. Hey, I wanted to move into segment 2, which is really to go into frog fishing. I know every angler has their favorite type baits. And, for me, I love fishing frogs. They're very productive. But it's not the first bait I go to in a lot of situations, and probably situations that I probably should be. But I have to admit, when Fred Rubanis pulled out a frog during Red Crest last week, I was stunned. I mean, he was the only one in the field.
50-degree water, and he's throwing a frog.
Yeah, but I also noticed you had one tied on. You had one tied on a rod on your deck as well. So talk to me a little bit about frogs.
So for me, I was waiting for it to happen too. I knew it was going to be warming up a little bit, but he was making it work when it was still really cold out. If those fish were shallow, a frog has got a ton of action. It's a bait you can keep in the strike zone for a long time, and big ones just bite it. And people think that, hey, it's awesome for just heavy cover, but it's great in open water or just around isolated targets. They're great because they're so weedless. You can throw them anywhere and get it back. You can throw them in thick pads and things like that, but you can also flooded bushes, flooded grass, skip them under boat docks and willow trees and things like that. And you can keep them there longer because they float. You can target those bass that are super shallow. And that's why the frog market the hollow bodied frog market has really exploded. There's a lot of different styles now. I think we got a slide that shows some of my favorite ones that I use. I mean, there's popping frogs, there's walking frogs, and there's the standard frog. So my favorite in open water is that popping frog there on the left. It really walks. It displaces a lot of water, makes a lot of sound. You can fish it super slow, or you can make it more aggressive. Say if it's a little bit windy or choppy, and if you do have thick matted cover, it does displace a lot of water. You can make it plop even on the top of a mat and things like that. So that's real good for really thick cover or open water. Then, the next one is the pad perch, and that's designed as a walking frog. It's got a flat tail to it, and it really walks just like, a sexy dog or, that walk the dog stick bait style. And then next to that is the standard frog. And you can see I've got a couple of smaller ones there too. I typically throw the full size Strike King Sexy Frog the majority of the time. It's my go-to all the time because I can walk it. You can basically do everything with it. It's just that, like the pad perch, when you need a faster walking action, it slices through the water a little quicker. It moves more. And then the popping pad perch, it really displaces a lot of water in it, and you can pop it and really, just like you would a big popper and push a lot of water and make a lot of noise with it. So it's just about, the exact presentation. You can see there's a lot of different colors there. Most of the time when bass bite a frog, I think it is a bluegill that they think that it is. You're imitating a bluegill, and you'll see I've got some really good bluegill colors there. But think about the belly color more than anything. So a black, a green pumpkin, a brown. Those are common real colors. If you're on a shad spawn or in the fall when the fish are pushing shad into the grass mats and things like that, white is good. But most of the year I'm using more natural colors, bluegill type colors, something with a yellow belly, a green pumpkin, brown. Black is always good, especially on cloudy days, things like that. I mean, if you had to pick one color frog to throw from forever, it would be a black one for me. It's just they always bite it. Its silhouette's good. And it's a big fish bait. I throw it on braid. I'm never going to throw it on less than 50 either. I throw it on 50 or 65 pound. I throw it on a shorter rod. I got a 7.2 skipping rod that I make, and because I love to skip that frog around, and it's a medium heavy action. It's got a little bit of tip, but a lot of backbone. Put it on that new Lew's Pro SP skipping reel, and it's magic. You can throw it right into a wall 10 feet from you, and you can't backlash that reel. So it really helps with the presentation, because you got to get it in places that other people wouldn't think of putting a bait.
So years ago, I did a Lake Commandos episode with Justin Lucas on a body of water that had a lot of heavy cover on it. And we stand on shore, we pick a couple patterns. He picked a hollow belly frog for it. And my first thought was he was going to fish the heavy stuff. And the first thing he did was head to the docks. And I was shocked. And he was throwing them under pontoons and along the dock edges. And I was surprised that he would go to a top water in midday on dock situation. Now, these are northern docks, pretty active fish, but you said the same thing. Why would you go to a subsurface presentation in that situation versus a frog?
It's got a lot of attractive qualities, with the legs on there on that frog, when it's sitting still, it's still moving. You can barely pop that braid with the tip of your rod and turn that frog sideways. It'll turn 180 on a dime. And it just looks so natural and so real. The one thing I do is modify it a little bit. When they come out of the package, they got real long tails. The more tail that you have on your frog, the more it's like a parachute behind it. It creates more drag and it slows that walking action down. So if I want that thing to really go like that, you want to shorten the legs. So I'll usually make one about a 1/4 inch shorter than the other one. And that makes it a little off balance. So if one's a little shorter, every time that frog stops, it's going to have a little less drag on that side that's shorter, and it makes the frog turn more. So it makes it walk easier by having those legs trimmed that way. I kind of had some of them trimmed in the shot that we showed there. There were some that were standard and some that weren't, but the less legs that you have on there, the more action that thing's going to have. So like at Gunnersville in the fall, one of the things a lot of people do down there is take all the legs off them so that it can it'll just turn right on a dime in its spot on top of those weed mats. They're not seeing the legs on top of a milfoil mat or a hydrilla mat anyway. So taking those legs off can help that action. So just think about that a little bit with it. There's a lot of different types of frogs. There's some that you can with buzzing tails and things, but I like something that has those legs on there. It's great in open water. It adds that extra action, and big ones bite it. It's a fun way to fish, and it's really, really effective.
Are you a fan of the action tails type baits that are out there nowadays?
If I'm going to throw a buzzing frog, I'm going to throw more of a toad style bait. And, I've tried a couple of them that have the action tails on them, the little paddle tails. And I've missed a lot of fish with them. The thing about a frog is I'm never, ever going to throw it without braid. The greatest innovation to help frog fishing was braided line. So one of the first tournaments that I ever fished was way back in the day at Thousand Islands. It was the first year of my career. It was like 1989, and Dusty Pine won it with a rat in Lake of the Isles. And it was an awesome Bassmaster show at the time. Where you're just working that little white rat over the top of these cheese mats, and these big ones would blow up, and you missed a lot of them, you'd lose a lot of them. But now these frogs are so much better designed. The bodies are designed to match these premium hooks, and they're soft, so they collapse. And with braided line, you just don't not get a hook in them. You can make a long cast, you can get them out of heavy cover, but even in open water, you want to throw braid.
So I was going to ask you to rank frogs in terms of how important they are to you in terms of baits. And I mean, where do they rank with you?
if I'm if I'm fishing a shallower water tournament, I have one tied on all the time. I mean, I love fishing a frog. I've learned a ton about it. Again, guys that are really good with them, Fred Rambanis and Ish Monroe, those guys are known for it. They made it popular. Dean Rojas, I mean, he won, several tournaments on a frog, but now everybody throws them. They had an edge when they were the first guys that were throwing them around docks, and they were throwing them in open water and throwing them over shallow grass and things like that. It's just a different presentation that big bass can't hardly help. It really imitates, a bluegill or a dying bluegill or sunfish or brim, something like that. And they just won't pass them up. So.
Yeah. Hey, there's a shot of you here in the middle of a pad field, and this to me looks like your typical.
That's classic northern frog country. I mean, there's just not many baits you can fish in a situation like that. I can fish that frog pretty fast, and that's what I'll do is I'll skitter it across the top of those pads and get one to blow up on it. And you always have a follow-up bait with a frog. So I typically I'm going to have a Strike King Ocho ready, or a caffeine shad, something a weighted soft plastic jerk bait that I can drop in there, or immediately get that frog right back there at that same spot. Once you find an area where they're at, then you can slow down. But don't think that it's just for heavy cover, because they are awesome around any shallow, vegetation or even scattered cover like that. They flat can't handle it. It's the legs, it's the action, the way they walk. And it's very easy to make them work really well with that braided line. If you got a rod that's got a little bit of tip and braid, and I would say 50 pound is the smart choice, for an all around good size line. I throw 65, I'm going to Sam Rayburn in 2 weeks. We might catch a 10, 12 pounder. So if you're throwing one back in the bushes there, you want to have 65, but up here in Michigan in the north, 50 pound casts far, it manages well, and you still get, a great hook set with no stretch.
Hey, if I ever get to heaven, I'm going to ask God why you put the slit in the pads, because I still don't understand it.
Thank goodness for braid.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, let's bring Gussy, Jeff Gustafson in. He won his first ever Bassmaster Elite tournament last week, and I learned a couple things from Gussy. That trophy is super heavy, Gussy, and number two, the phone rings a lot after you win an event like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, Kevin's lifted more of those than any human alive, so he knows. I was really, when Lisa handed it to me, I was very surprised how heavy it was. So
it's a good problem to have to worry about the weight of that.
I'm not complaining about it. I'm not complaining, but that was the first ththing I kind of noticed.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I know that, coming from Canada, your number one fan is Mercer, probably. He loves the Canadian guys. And you guys have learned to fish. I mean, you fish basically the same kind of stuff that I do. I'm a Great Lakes guy. I love to catch smallmouth and that, but also the northern largemouth thing. So it's pretty tricky, to come down to those super cold tournaments like that and have it figured out. And it was impressive to see. I call that Damiki rigging, what you were doing, or basically that's you call it hanging a minnow. That's live bait.
That's what I was doing. Yeah.
But I can promise you that there was probably not one local in that area that would have dreamed that tournament would have been won fish that way.
No, and I had a group of boats that were there watching every day, and I mean, I meant to thank them on stage because they were great. Like, none of them fished. They never got in my way. I felt like there was a few of them that were there every day, and I felt like if somebody did try to fish there, these guys probably would have blasted them. Like, it was almost like it almost put me at ease a little bit. And I mean, if we were a couple lakes down the river, it might not have been the same.
Yeah, I know what you're saying there, but no, I know that a lot of the fans just really want to learn. But even though if they were watching you drift that canal, and trust me, I fished that when we had the Classic there a couple of years ago. I spent a good bit of time when you run your mega side imaging there. It is just awesome looking area, all those rocks on the bottom and that. But I was dragging a tube. Fishing a jig. I threw a 6XD out there. It was a little warmer. We didn't have as cold of conditions as you had, but I only got one bite out there. But I don't think we had quite the same conditions, but man, it looked beautiful out there. And really nobody in our tournament at all caught them through that area at all.
No.
Hey,
Dude, I got so lucky. I mean, I found that the last day of practice, and I didn't roll through there and catch big ones. I was literally on the last little hour of being out there, and I had a tough practice. I mean, the only info I had on this place was watching your classic from a couple years ago, and I mean, everyone was bank beaten pretty much. And going into the event, it would have been a struggle for me doing that. I just never found any pattern, or the few fish I caught were random. And I went out there and I caught like a 17-incher, a 16-incher, a 15-incher. But every time I set the hook on one, there was, I'd see 3 or 4 fish lift off the bottom with the one I hooked. So I just put a dot, kept going, and I was just on that like mad scramble to find as much of it as I could. And then showed up the first morning of the tournament, and half the bites I got were 18 inchers and had a limit within an hour. And then even after the first day, I was like, did I get lucky today? It was still, then when I got back the second day and they were still there and I could catch them, then I realized I've got a really awesome opportunity here, and thankfully it worked out.
Yeah.
How many days did you pre-fish? I mean, and you really didn't do very well to start, right?
No, we had 3 days to practice. I think I caught 3 or 4 keeper largemouths in 3 days. Like it was tough. And I mean, you look down the list. I mean, I think it took 11 pounds for 2 days to get a check. I mean, it was just really tough fishing. Water was 45, 46 degrees, and so just going into it, like the first day I was going there hoping I could catch 1 or 2 and then hopefully catch a couple largemouths in the afternoon and like just try to survive this event. And it's just funny how I'm sure, Kevin, you've done this a bunch of times where you just don't know what usually the tournament started and you can exploit it and set the hook and really see what's there.
Yeah, usually, the best tournaments that I've had are when the practice is pretty dang tough and you really just struggle to get anything going, and you figure it out during the tournament. You really learn it then. And what a lot of people don't understand too is the smallmouth down there, there's an 18-inch minimum size limit. So in largemouth, it's 12. So you're fishing for a real small percentage of the overall population. I caught, when we were there a couple of years ago, I caught a few of them on some gravel bars and things like that. And I kind of just got away from them because it was so random to catch an 18-incher that it was just like you were crazy to target them, because smallmouth they like the current and they like barren, gravel flats down there in those lakes. And it's totally different water than the largemouth where you're fishing bluffs and laydowns and docks and things like that. But as it warmed up, I wondered how it would hold up. But I mean, with that much current going through there, those fish weren't going anywhere.
No, it had all the ingredients. I mean, there was bait, and that's what I noticed, because I think everyone in the tournament probably launched at that ramp at some point over the 3 practice days. And, I idled through there, and there was rock that, like you could see on the side imaging. There was bait everywhere, clouds of bait, and, and a nice amount of current. So
Gussy, when did you make the decision to try this technique? I mean, what led to the decision?
Okay, so I drifted through there the first time, and I kind of was close to the bank. So I threw a jerkbait a couple times, and then I could see all the rock on my 360. I put a Ned rig down, drifted with that a little bit, didn't get any bites. I tried a blade bait, just sort of ripping that as I drifted along. And I didn't catch anything. I think I had 1 bite on the Ned rig. And Clint Davis was on the other side of the canal and just, been friends for a long time. He called me and said, and he was having a tough practice too. He called me and said, have you caught anything through here? Did you get any bites? And I said, no. And he said, I was just throwing a little Kayak. I had it under my trolling motor, and I had a couple marks kind of come up to it, go down, come up, go down. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, didn't, just kind of kept going. And I went and did another couple hour largemouth tour, and that was just kind of bugging me. So I went back and I tied up my Damiki rig, and I'm not kidding you, I put it down and drifted about 10 feet and got walloped by a 17-incher, and then, reeled it up. Okay, that's cool. Dropped my bait down again, caught another one, dropped my bait down again, caught another one. And these weren't keepers, but like I say, every time I set the hook, 3 or 4 other fish were following these ones up. So I just was optimistic that, if you catch any number of them, you'll probably get a keeper or two. And the first morning, I caught 12 fish in the first 10 minutes, and 3 were, big 19 and 20 inchers. And
wow.
So it was my lucky day.
So take us through the technique itself. I mean, you're rigging the bait. You're not dragging bottom, but you're drifting. I mean, how did you fish the bait?
So very critical that you kept the bait, on your 2D screen. I watched my bait the whole time. If you lost it, you weren't. I had to keep it. It felt like between a foot or 2 off the bottom, and there was a lot of rock, and I wanted to drop that bait in those holes behind the rocks. Like that's where the fish were kind of hanging out and sitting, just waiting for something to blow over their heads. And so it was a little bit of practice just to kind of follow the bait with my trolling motor and stay on top of it. And just like up here where I live at Lake of the Woods and Rainy Lake, from midsummer through the fall, that's the predominant technique to catch smallmouth. I mean, all my buddies are really good at it. It's just and walleyes, we catch a lot of walleyes doing that. So it was just a technique that I was comfortable with. It was natural. And, it just seemed right. The funny thing was I had, I'm a big Ned rig fan. I mean, like we all are, and everywhere I've ever been, I mean, it's if you know where the fish are, it's hard to beat a Ned rig if you can put it in their face. And I couldn't catch them on it. I'd get drum, and these fish were really glued to the bottom. I mean, I couldn't drive around and necessarily see them on my console unit. Yeah, you had to have a bait down there to kind of suck them off the bottom to where you could see them. But yeah, they just that Damiki deal worked, and I just I found it late in practice. I would have loved to have figured it out earlier in practice, and I could have tried some swim baits and different baits. I mean, they were spitting up shad. They had big, quite a few had tails sticking out of their throat. I mean, they were in the mood to eat for sure. So there could have been other ways to catch them, but it worked pretty good. And, I just never really had in the tournament. The first few days, I mean, I caught, I didn't want to burn it up. I mean, I felt like if I got 5 keeper smallmouths, that was a solid day, and it was, and I was just right back to Knoxville.
Yeah, it's hard. If you catch 5 18 inchers, those fish are built different because they're swimming in the current all the time. But 5 18 inchers there is going to weigh 15 pounds, I mean, should. Yeah. And you get a few good ones in there, and consistency when you have a tough tournament, I mean, the whole country was experiencing crazy. I mean, that's why our red crest got moved from Texas, because the lake down there was still froze, and the conditions got nice at Eufaula, but when we showed up, the same thing. The water temperature was in the upper 40s there, and it just doesn't get that cold down there. So Knoxville, I mean, I thought that you guys would see upper 30s when you got there, and that's brutal. That's just tough to handle. But when you get a shad kill and when you get cold water like that, that's when those fish, they start suspending off the bottom and they start following. But that current, I'm sure, had them sucked down there, and that rig was just perfect. The way it stands out. I mean, you're basically a Damiki rig, for anybody that doesn't know, is it just stands out off to the side of the jig head, and really makes it look like it's just a shad just fluttering down with the current.
And Gussy, do you have a copy? Do you have a bait with you? What are those?
I got my rig right here, and that's the one I use. So I'm using a Z-Man bait, and I think there's something to the Elastec that it's buoyant, and I think it just promotes being horizontal and natural in the water. And then the other thing, like I was constantly, if I was check setting or I caught a fish, like you can see how that knot is kind of off to in front of the bait. That's no good. You want that knot like totally vertical, and that's going to just help the bait sort of be natural in the water. So that's sort of the two. You want it nice and straight on the jig as well. Like that's key. That's a 3/8 ounce jig. If I would have had halves, with a 1/0 or 2/0 sort of smaller hook like that, it would have been even better. But you want that heavy for that technique. You don't want to use an 1/8 ounce or even a 1/4 ounce jig. I mean, a heavier jig's better. It's going to stay under your trolling motor a lot better and get down there.
Especially in the current. Yeah.
Around, it just stays with the boat a little bit better too.
Yeah. The main thing, we do a lot of that drift in the river here we call it slipping with the current. I've done a lot of it steelhead fishing and things too, where you're basically trying to match the speed of your bait, which the current down on the bottom is different than it is on the surface. So you're using your trolling motor to try to, once you get that locked on your, I imagine you're using Helix or Solix 12s on your boat, and where you're just focused on trying to keep that in the same zone, keeping your boat over it. So sometimes you got to speed up, sometimes you got to slow down just to keep that locked on the graph. And
this was interesting too. Like the first 2 days, pretty calm, not a lot of wind. And it had been dry for a few days. So I guess probably just not a ton of flow, but the current was like 0.8, 0.9, 1 mile an hour. By day 3, like we'd gotten a bunch of rain, the wind was cranked up, really pumping into that canal on the Tellico side. I had my Ultrex on 10, and it was I had it on 10 to just try to stay on top of my bait like that. It was up to like 3 to 3.5 mile an hour current, like crazy. And I mean, the fish were still in the same places. It was a lot harder to like get a hit on the weight. I mean, I'd have to try and drift 3 or 4 times to like get right where I wanted to land, And it was, when I first found it, I thought the fish were pretty random in there, but they weren't. They were like, I had 2 or 3 dots where like if I hit it right, I was guaranteed I was going to catch one, whether it was a keeper or not. That was the luck factor, maybe a little bit. But
so were the bites aggressive, or did you have a kind of a mix of where they'd slam it, or did you have to look to me? You were just holding the rod. I'm used to the double rod fishing, but you were just drifting with the current. Were you working the bait at all?
The only time I wouldn't move it, except if I had one, like at 19 of the 20 fish I caught, I actually watched them come up on my Helix machine, and a lot of them would just come up and smoke it. I wouldn't have to do anything, but I could tell if they were moving a little bit slower, kind of following it. Then it was give the bait a little shake or just lift it. Like sometimes just that keep away game with smallmouths, it will trigger them. And I certainly had some that I got denied by, and then I had probably 3 or 4 times a day. I mean, if you're watching, I do this, and I think they just come up and like hit your bait with their mouth closed, and because it's hard, like you're feeling it good, and there's no way that it's in their mouth. When you set and there's nothing there, I think they just.
Yep, the nature of the brown beast.
Yeah,
that's a frustrating fish. Hey, what's your next event?
I got about a week and a half off here, and then it'll be back to Pickwick in Alabama. So we're right back at it here pretty soon, and maybe another smallmouth event. We'll see.
I'll bet you that there's a lot of guys trying that rig up there below the dam at Pickwick after they watch you do that there. So it might be a little. You might have to change it up just a little bit there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hey, Gussy, we got to let you go, but thanks for coming on the College of Bass tonight, and congratulations, dude. That's an awesome event. So awesome win.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. I talked to Mercer about an hour ago, so he did say to say hi to KVD, and he thinks the world of you, as you know. And my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much, and all the best the rest of the season.
Yeah, good luck at Pickwick, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, see you later. Whew, that's an exciting. Your first event. I'm sure you're looking back going, "That's I know what that feels like, man."
Yeah, there's nothing like your first win, but I'll tell you what, the most impressive one is always your last one. You just never know. I've been fortunate to win a lot of events, a lot of different types, styles, formats, things over the years, and it just never gets old. The more you get to do it, the more you truly appreciate it. But you can tell he's pretty excited. He had that blue trophy sitting back there in the background, and his phone's been ringing off the hook, and he's got a lot of fans. He's obviously a really, really good angler. He's been close before, always, in the mix quite often. And so to get that first win, and it happened when he really least expected it. He had a tough practice, but he made it happen. So that's really cool.
That's really cool. Hey, Kevin, our next guest is Christine Fisher. She's one of the nation's most passionate kayak bass anglers. She fishes a number of circuits, including the Bass, the Hobie, the KBF, and she's cashed a ton of checks over the years. Christine, I think the last time I talked to you, were in South Carolina or North Carolina, and now you're somewhere in Texas or something. But let's bring in Christine Fisher. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all doing?
We're doing good.
Good.
Now, hey, you moved from Nebraska down to Nashville, I suspect just to be closer to all the tournaments, or kind of take us through your thought process on that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Nebraska, and I lived on the road for 2.5 years in an RV fishing the national kayak circuit. And I just recently bought a house on Watts Bar, just down from where Gussy just won that last elite event. And I Airbnb it because I'm going to be on the road for 3 months starting right now for 5 tournaments in a row. Kind of all over the place, but it does give me a home base, gives me a garage so I can have all my stuff there. But yeah, definitely a lot of my tournaments are within 6-7 hours of Tennessee. So it kind of made sense for me.
So what event are you fishing this week?
I've got a tournament on Broken Bow in Oklahoma.
Okay. And free fishing is going, how's it going for you?
Well, so the water here has fluctuated 20 feet in the last couple of weeks. So those fish are kind of in a funk with that. You know, with that big winter storm, they needed to kind of pull the guts out of it to generate some power. But the water is on the rise. The temps are right. I think it's going to be kind of a tough bite, but I always like when they fish like that. So I think it'll be pretty good. So
kayak fishing is booming. What really led you to kind of get into kayak fishing over, say, boat fishing?
You know, honestly, I've always loved to fish and I've always loved to compete. And, you know, I got into this thing probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And back then when I was looking at the two options, I was somebody that was very financially conscious of everything going on. And I looked at the price of getting a boat, you know, having a trailer, all the things. I grew up fishing walleye tournaments with my family. So I know when you buy a boat, there's 1,000 things that go wrong all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I could do that, or I could be a co-angler. I thought about signing up as a co, but back then, you know, I don't really learn as well that way. I like to be in control of my decisions, live or die by my decisions. And I saw a flyer for a kayak tournament, and I thought I can get into this relatively inexpensive, low cost of operating, and it kind of just caught fire, and I love it. I can get out there on my own, find my own fish, make my own decisions, pattern the fish. And I think I've learned a lot more with all that time on the water and kind of making my own choices out there. So at that time, it was right for me.
Hey, Kevin, have you had a chance to fish much out of a kayak?
You know, I do a little bit. I've got a couple of nephews that are big into it and fish a lot of the tournaments. And believe me, it's gotten really technical for kayak tournament anglers too. They've got super impressive rigs. They've got ways to get them in the water and hard to get to places, pretty easy. And I mean, you are limited with your tackle, but you can get into areas that other people can't, that I can't get my Z21. You know, there was a big kayak tournament going on the same time when we were at Lake Fork last year. And I've seen kayaks coming out of the woodwork in places that I fought and worked to get into. And you'd come around the corner, there'd be a kayak already there in the back and the little hidey hole where the fish were at. So that's what's neat about it. But for me, what the hardest thing would be to limit my tackle. So, I mean, how do you organize, or how do you plan your day out, and how do you store your tackle on your kayak and rods and reels? Like, how many rods and reels do you carry, and how much tackle?
You know, Kevin, I'm honestly kind of a gear junkie, and I've got a kayak that allows for my obsession of having too much stuff. I've got a large crate, and I get, you know, that Plano makes those edge boxes, and those things are so slick. I can fit about 8 to 10 of those in the back of that H crate. I typically, when I'm pre-fishing, I'll like to take about 8 to 10 rods, but with a tournament, I'll have anywhere from 12 to 14, kind of depending on where I'm fishing. I store those horizontally in my kayak. I've got 2 of the plastic Plano edge boxes that fit under my seat. So, you know, I own about 10 of those, and I have various creature baits, stick baits, tubes, what have you. And whatever I'm using the most of for that tournament, I'll grab 2 of those boxes, throw them under my seat act as backstock. And then up front, I've got another large compartment that I've usually carry swim baits and just excess, whatever I need for that given event.
Yep, your boat looks about like mine. You don't want to get caught out there not having everything that you need. So, the one thing that I've found real quick in kayak fishing is that it's a different perspective. When you're lower, especially when you get tight areas and that a little bit shorter rods and braided line is just like such an attribute in so many situations. When you're fishing shallow tournaments. Now, I know you fish year round and there's, you're fishing offshore, you got electronics, you can throw deep crankbaits or throw a Carolina rig or whatever you need. But when kayaks are really at their true strength is in those shallow water tournaments, if you get flooded conditions, things like that. So hopefully the lake will come up for you there, because that's when it's a real advantage to be in a kayak.
It is. And Kevin, I have to give you a little bit of props here. That tournament on Lake Fork, a good friend of mine actually won that tournament, kayak tournament. And he saw a number of the MLF guys come and fish in that area. And he said he saw you, and he's like, the only person, there are probably 7 or 8 people that came and fished there, but only one guy fished the right side of the bank and was fishing it right. And that happened to be you. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That's one of my favorite lakes, and it is a perfect place to have that. And that time, the timing when we were there, it was just warming up and they were just getting up there, but the lake was fluctuating. Those fish were there. It was fun. The great thing about Lake Fork is on any cast, you might catch a 13-pounder, and there's not many places you can do that.
Unless it's OH Ivy now.
Yeah, obviously. It's a 15-pounder.
Right.
Hey, Kevin, when you're in an average tournament day, how many miles are you putting on the boat typically?
Am I putting on?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it just depends on the lake that you're at and how much you're running, but I'm going to do a bunch. That's the thing, with the kayak, you got to kind of pick your area. Of course, you can move, but you're burning the clock to do that. You can get in your vehicle and load up. And I'm going to tell you, just like that tournament at Lake Fork, kayak anglers are super efficient at getting in and out. I mean, you're doing it all by yourself. It's not like you got a partner to help you launch and load the boat. I mean, they've got all kinds of contraptions to sneak through the woods and get all, I mean, your kayak's not light when it's loaded full of gear and all that. So you gotta be able to get to, someplace close to the water and back it down or have a winch and crank it in and out. I've seen some pretty ingenious stuff going on for people to get into places to save them time getting in and out.
Well, my point is that, Christine, how many on an average tournament day, how many miles are you putting on your kayak in a tournament situation?
Well, Steve, if all goes to plan, not much. I try really hard when I'm doing my map study and I'm breaking down water. I like to, ideally, I've got my plan A, B, and C within 2.5 miles. I've got my secondary stuff. I've got my stuff where my fish were, areas they could pull off to. I've got, I like to have a very diverse area. So I have multiple spots that I can run to. That doesn't, and I got to be able to manage my fish. That doesn't always work out. So there have been times where I've put on as many as 10 to 12 miles on a tournament, and I'm exhausted by the end of that. But, sometimes you got to do it if all your game plans aren't working out in that area that you originally thought was going to pan out.
So you're fishing out of a Hobie, which is a pedal drive. So you put that many miles on. Are there events where you're actually fishing any type of a electric motor on it?
Yes, the Bass allows motors, and so does KBF. So the Hobie, the 3 national trails, there's one of them that's just human propulsion. The other 2 do allow motors. And I this last year got an electric motor, Torpedo, which definitely saves some energy. And it is very advantageous for covering a little bit more water.
Well, hey, we're going to have to let you go, but thanks for coming on College of Bass tonight, and good luck in the tournament this week. I'll follow you and see how it's going, but thanks again for coming on.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks. Good luck.
We'll see you later. Obviously a very serious fisherman. I enjoy just when you talk to her about power fishing and others, she's a hardcore. Hey, Kevin, I wanted to move into some questions before we run out of time. We've had a ton of them that came in.
It goes so fast every night.
I mean, I look at the clock, we got 11 minutes left, and it's like, it seems like we started 5 minutes ago, so it's kind of fun. But hey, Tom Wolverton asked, he said, do you ever think about flipping or throwing a jig when the time is right for it? He said, I've never seen you throwing a jig, just wondering why.
I throw tons of jigs. Matter of fact, I have 4 Plano Edge jig boxes rigged up. So I do have one with bladed jigs, but I've got 3. One I use for casting and structure jigs, football jigs. I got one for swim jigs and one for flipping jigs. And, jig is probably arguably one of the most versatile baits that you can throw, because you can fish it in any depth zone. It's a big fish bait. It really does a great job of imitating a crawfish or a bluegill, which are 2 main forages of big bass. And if you throw the right color and, with the right trailer on it, you can make it imitate a shad real well too. So I fish jigs a lot. And, it's something that I've always got, not just one. Usually I've got 4 or 5 tied on, from finesse jigs all the way up to, heavy punching jigs. But, and we have so many choices now that, you got creature baits, you got all the plastics, you got jigs, you got swim baits, and that it's just about using the right tool for the right situation. But a jig it's a mainstay. It's something that every bass angler better have a bunch of edge boxes loaded with, I think.
So we had another question from Scott Smith. He said, if you were to pick a all-around best gear ratio, what would it be?
I would say that, you want to do something kind of in between. I like a 7.5 to 1 for an all-around gear ratio. Yeah. That on the luge reel that I use brings in 31 inches of line per turn. It's something that I can go fast with if I need to, but I can also slow down if I need to. But that's why we make different gear ratios is to really help enhance whatever technique that it is you're fishing. If you're flipping and pitching where you're spending a lot of time just trying to get your bait back in from dead water, that's where you want that super high speed. If you're fishing a super fast bait, burning a spinner bait, that's where an 8.3 to 1 works. If you're fishing spinner baits and crankbaits and things like that, a 7.5 to 1 is great. But if you need a true power ratio for big deep diving plugs, or you're fishing real cold water where you want to force yourself to be a little slower, that's where, a 6.2 to 1 or, something like that, where, 25 inches a turn, 31 inches a turn, and 35 plus that's the 3 speeds that I like to fish.
Awesome. Mary Medlin Brown asked the question, if you asked all the pros, and I'll ask you, what's been your biggest bass? What'd you catch it on?
I've caught 2 bass that weighed 12 pounds. And believe it or not, both of them I caught deep cranking. I caught one at Lake Murray in South Carolina, and the other one I caught at Sam Rayburn in Texas, where we're headed in a couple of weeks. So I love Texas. And this year, with all this cold weather, you're seeing the big bass come out. Christine talked about it at OH Ivy there. There was a 5 bass, 60-pound limit caught. There was a 14.25 caught at the Big Bass Tour event at Lake Conroe last weekend. So this cold conditions all through the country makes for a good shad die-off. The bass are feasting. They're getting bigger. So as they move up in the spring, we're going to see a lot of real giants get caught.
I'll date it a little bit, but my biggest one came on a power lizard. Down at northern Florida. It was just over 11, which was a pretty awesome fish. But hey, another question was, if you had a preferred length for swim baits on a bladed jig, what would it be?
For a rod, my favorite rod for bladed jigs is a rod that, I designed one. It's a composite rod from Lew's. It's a 7-foot one. It's a medium heavy action. It's got a lot of backbone, but a little bit of tip. But because it's composite, it just allows those fish to get the bait good before you pull on them. You feel so much when you're fishing a bladed jig. You feel all that vibration, and you feel the fish actually come up and inhale it. You want to make sure that they get it all the way in their mouth. And that's why I like that rod. So for targets, that shorter rod's better. I've got a 7.4 version that I use for open water grass. Where your accuracy isn't as important, but that's my go-to for it.
Awesome. Aaron Smith had asked, he noticed at Redcrest you were fishing a white thunder cricket day 1, day 2, but he said it looked like you switched colors on day 3. What was the thought process in that change of color?
Well, the biggest thing for me is I was there was a lot of shad around, so I was throwing a white one, but I also had a green pumpkin. I was switching back and forth. Fishing a lot of the same areas, through it, just trying to show them something different. The green pumpkin really imitates a bluegill real well. And the white, was the shad, and really the sky conditions too. So the first day was real cloudy. We had a little more wind and that white, a little brighter color, they were more active and aggressive, and they were choking it. I caught them really good on the white one the first day. And then as the sun came out, it seemed like that green pumpkin was better because the water was, it was stained, but it wasn't muddy.
All right. Next question is from a guy named Steve Pennaz. He says, can I join you next time you and Luke Bryan fish together?
Yeah, Luke's a great guy. And, anytime that I'm heading through that area, it's a lot. We try to get together. He came up and fished with me last year in Michigan for smallmouth for the first time. And he's truly, truly passionate about bass fishing. He loves it, man. I mean, and one thing you probably wouldn't know, you'd never guess, is that he is allergic to bass. He's allergic to bluegill or crappie, anything with scales that make him all, get itchy and swell up. So he has to take an Allegra to do it, but he loves it so much it hasn't slowed him down. He's been fishing for him his whole life. And I just think he's just a fun guy for somebody that's had as much success as he's had. To watch him on the water, he's just like a little kid every time he catches one. So it's fun.
I noticed the photo that you had. Did you stop on the way back from Redcrest or something?
Yeah, I mean, I had to drive right by his house, and he called me out of the blue, and he said, "Well, man, where you at? What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, it's funny, man. I'm really close to where you live." And he's like, "Well, man, what are you doing?" And he had been golfing with a few buddies, and he came right from golfing to go, to be able to jump in my boat. And he's just he's a sponge though. He's asking a million questions, wants to learn more techniques. We caught him really good on a jerk bait. It was really cold. The water was like 45 degrees and, they just didn't want to chase much. So we caught him on a jerk bait really good. So he's a big fan of that now in cold water.
It's funny. One of the pro anglers on the Berkeley staff is a guy named Mark Kortz, and he fishes walleye and bass, and he's actually allergic to fish as well, which is really interesting for someone that's a professional. He's also a Great Lakes captain with a charter service for that, but he's allergic to fish, which is really interesting. Hey, we're running out of time tonight. We got a really strong show next week. We've got Clark Windlet. He won Angler of the Year for the Elite Circuit this year. He's going to come on board. We're going to talk a little bit of junk fishing with him, and then a favorite topic. I know it's one of my favorite topics, but is yours as well, is lipless cranks. So that should be really fun. Also, wanted to encourage everybody to after the show is over, please support the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame and get yourself a great College of Bass mug from Yeti, which would be awesome. You're gonna love it.
You just got to go to the Plano site and get the Yeti mug. I mean, they're customized for it, and I mean it's a great value for it. And again, 100% of the proceeds go to the Professional Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. So it's kind of a one of a kind special deal we did just for these episodes that we're doing. So go and get them while they're still there.
Yeah, we're gonna be picking a winner here in just a second, but I want to ask, what's your next event, Kevin?
So we actually go to Sam Rayburn for the first regular season Bass Pro Tour event for Major League Fishing here, and it's the last week, and I think we'll be doing our last show on that Wednesday, and I've got Edwin Evers lined up to be our guest that night for that one too. So I think it's the 24th is the last one, and that is right midweek in that event right there. So
you know who else we're going to bring in on that event? Bro. We're going to bring Brian. We're going to talk ice fishing on College of Bass for just a little bit, but it'll be fun to bring Bro back. It was really fun having him, working with him on College of Ice a while back. Hey, we've got a winner tonight for the Plano prize pack. We're $275. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we've got a winner, Kai. If you got the up there, no, not John Creek. That was last week. We got a new winner this week, Bob Mull from Pennsylvania. So congratulations, Bob. We're gonna drop us a private message with your address and everything, and we'll get that shipped out as soon as possible. But hey, Kevin, awesome hanging out with you tonight. Lots of great information, and I look forward to next week already.
I'm looking forward to putting these to work at Rayburn in a few weeks. It should be prime. The waters that we went from cold all around the country to things are really warming up. We just came off of a full moon. So I think a lot of the fish are going to start to spawn in the deep south now and really get into it. And we're going to see that moving north. I mean, here at my house in Michigan, it's going to be warm, and I'm watching. I've got a pond in my backyard there, and the ice is just starting to open on one of the edges already. So I think it's go out quick. And as soon as the ice goes out, man, it's some of the best fishing of the year up here. So on Monday morning, legally, ice fishing huts had to be off the lakes in Minnesota, and it always seems odd that it's so early. But it's supposed to be 56 here next week, and that ice is going to go fast. So I'm excited. Spring's coming, and we're going to be getting into boats here pretty quick and all over the country, which is going to be fun. But hey, everybody, thanks for joining us on College of Bass. Kevin, we'll see you next week, and everybody, we'll see you next week as well. Have a good.
Thanks for watching the College of Bass. Join us for an all-new episode every Wednesday night.